calls to you. Like
Hmm.
you have such an intimate interaction with a novel. And
Yeah.
like for you, it taught you a lesson about your sister. Like this
Yeah.
is about us finding empathy, about finding lives that we're not going to live. And it's
Yeah.
such a teaching moment that literature is powerful because knowledge is power. And it's really
Yeah.
true. Like if
Yeah.
you keep trying to attack
Uh,
literature, you're attacking us having free thinking in a
yeah.
society. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Andrew Rimby, aka Andrew. Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room podcasts. And before you hear today's episode, which I just know you're going to love, can you please do me a favor? And wherever you're listening, if it's Spotify or Apple, please rate and review us. Make sure you're following the podcast. Share it with friends, family, anyone you think would just love hearing this conversation. And you can watch our podcast on YouTube. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. It's called the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and you'll see the video episode. So please make sure you like the video you're watching and comment. I always respond to the comments. Also, we have a Patreon. So if you don't want any of the ads and you want bonus material, join our Patreon. There's a 1 week free trial. It's patreon.com/ivory tower boiler room. And the free trial is for the professor level. Without further ado, here is today's exciting episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. It is Dr. Andrew Rimby, joined with my amazing co-host, Dr. Jan Balakian. Hi, Jan. So we are now into our second episode of the Teaching College English and Writing podcast series. I'm really excited because I am joined with a guest who's taught me so much already. She is a professor of English at Seton Hall. She was the chair in English when I was hired. So I have an affinity over our coffee chats. So Dr. Angela Weisl previously taught at Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio, and at Columbia University. At Seton Hall, she teaches medieval literature, Chaucer, think Canterbury Tales, everyone out there, an amazing film version that's a little risque. I'm sure Angela has thoughts on it.
I have thoughts.
Historical, so good. Historical linguistics, women's and gender studies, and early British literature. So, welcome to the podcast, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm just curious because before we started recording, we were talking a little about you as chair. So we don't have to get into all the ins and outs of being a chair, but I'm kind of curious, do you feel that your pedagogy, you learned aspects of your pedagogy while you were chair that informed how you approach the classroom now? Or do you feel like being a chair was kind of in its own corner?
I think it's hard to separate. I mean, certainly a lot of what I did as chair was in its own corner, but it also allowed me to have conversations with colleagues in ways that I hadn't before, particularly with our first year writing colleagues like you. It allowed me to have conversations with students that I hadn't had before. You know, I only primarily talked to my own students or students who were my advisees, and I ran the graduate program for 20 years, so I talked to a lot of graduate students, but to have conversations with students about what they were struggling with, what they were having a hard time with, what they liked and what they didn't like when they came in with problems that they hoped that I could solve, I think affected, if not so much my pedagogy in terms of the kinds of exercises we did in class, although certainly some of that was affected by talking with colleagues a lot who have such cool ideas and who came, you know, with new, fresh ideas. That was certainly affected sort of what went on in the classroom. But thinking about what students can be asked to do, what I can expect from them, where I need to give them more space, where I need to give them a little bit more opportunity to have a hard time, to struggle, and to be understanding of that. And of course, all of the things that happened during COVID, I think really have affected my pedagogy. So, you know, I think I feel differently about certainly students attending class in funny ways. I've always been a sort of like you have to be there person, but now, I don't want my students coming to class sick. I don't want them coughing on me, whether it's COVID or it's a little cold. I think that has changed. And so my feelings about attendance have shifted a little bit. So, there's so many ways over those 7 years that I think things have changed for me in the classroom and as a faculty member. Um,
So how many years have you not, not asking your age, Angela.
oh,
You
it's
never
okay.
ask someone that, but how many years have you been teaching English or writing?
Well, I started as a TA in 1988, and I started full time at Wittenberg in 1992, and then I came to Seton Hall full time in 1995. So we're pushing 40 years.
Wow, it's
You
incredible.
know.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, this technology boom that you've lived through as
yeah,
an educator, like how has something Jan and I consistently
mm,
talk about is the
yeah,
attention span, and I know you
mhm,
do too. Like,
yeah,
there's even cause not to assign novels anymore in the classroom. I mean, like, the
hmm
way that advice has now kind of been, teach more the genre or teach excerpts, like try to get the students' attention. Is that
hmm
something that was always present with you, or do you think that we really have gone through a major shift?
I think we have gone through a major shift. I don't know whether I'm resisting it blindly, and setting myself up for failure, or whether I'm resisting it in the theory that if we don't ask our students to read novels, they never will. And if we do ask them to, they may not finish it, they may not read all of it, but at least they'll start to read it, and maybe they'll like the idea of reading a novel. It is easier teaching primarily upper level English majors, which is the largest percentage of the students that I've been teaching for a while now. They tend to like to read. They tend to, they may not want to read all of Beowulf, but they tend to like to read, the things that are popular, for instance. So they're more sort of readers, I think, than maybe the students that people are teaching in first year writing, where I think it's a bigger fight. Um, we taught novels in first year writing very briefly in my time at Seton Hall. When I started, we could teach a novel, and then fairly quickly that sort of left the 1202 curriculum. So I think that hasn't changed in some ways with our introductory students. I liked teaching a novel because there was a lot you could do, with it as a whole thing, and talking about characters and talking about development and talking about how kind of build up things that confuse your reader, and then you answer those questions that happen over more time than they do in a short story. But I think anything we can do to get our students excited about reading and writing and thinking, we should do. And if teaching a novel becomes such an impediment, that they really, it's just a failure. There's no sense that, well, at least they read the first half, or at least they read, some of it at the beginning, the end, and a synopsis of the middle or something. Then maybe we have to move to shorter pieces. But uh, if we are more open perhaps to letting our students do their reading in audiobooks, then maybe that's another possibility. So I don't think I want to give up yet on the novel, but I do think that attention spans are definitely shifting, and my own included. I mean, I see the way
Mm.
that having a cell phone myself has made me less attentive. Some of that's
Yep,
probably aging. I'm
sure it is.
61 years old. Things happen. The brain gets fried. But I definitely feel like I have less attention span. My students do. So yeah, I think it's something we're dealing with. But I also feel that we are in a unique opportunity to help students build skills. So maybe we want to help them build their focus, their attention. So.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to ask because I was teaching out of my field. I designed a contemporary fiction course,
So
and
fun.
yeah, and I wanted to teach sections of novels, and I had a big pushback from some colleagues, and I wanted to know how you felt about, I guess, what happens in any anthology where they give you sections of a
Mhm.
novel. Do you feel that compromises the student reading of it? I personally like the idea
Yeah.
because in the end, we only remember selected moments anyway.
hmm That's a good point. I mean, I teach a literature of adolescence class, and that's the one place I really do teach novels. But because it's literature of adolescence, it's certainly stuff that my students tend to read because I lean earlier, because I teach early stuff. I mean, I do think that there are ways that excerpts do the trick. Certainly I can't in British Survey teach all of the Canterbury Tales. I teach the general prologue
Yeah.
and one or two tales, and that works just fine. Or I teach one book of Gulliver's Travels, and I feel like that works just fine. So I think, the thing that's most important is if it works for you and what you're trying to do in the classroom, then that's what you should do. I think that to say there's only one way to do things is missing the point, and that we go into our class with a variety of goals, a variety of teaching goals, and some of them are about what we want our students to have read. And I think we were chatting before the beginning about teaching how much canon do we want to do, how much sort of response to the canon do we want to do. So those are
Yeah.
certain kinds of choices, but then there are also other kinds of choices, like what do we want our students to have thought about? And maybe we can do that better with full novels, or maybe we can do that better with excerpts. So I think as long as we know what we're doing and why we're doing it and what our goals are and how the texts we choose help us to meet them, there shouldn't really be too many boundaries around that.
Mm.
I mean, when we were again talking about how much do we teach in Brit Survey, I feel like I can get some ideas across about what some kinds of poetical movements are doing with 3 poems, and our students will read three
Yeah.
poems, or we can read them with them in class. If I assign 10 and talk about three, am I wasting their time? Or am I setting them up for failure because they've read three others than the ones I happen to want to talk about? So I think that these ideas about, what has to be on our syllabus really could use some rethinking. You know,
Yeah, I
you know,
feel
what do,
like this
what do
is
we want? What do we want our
so
students to get out of the class? How do we get there?
well, and I love that you're saying, Angela, that it's really like you as the educator, the professor, following what you're motivated by. And this is kind of like connecting a through line to what we had in our first
Yeah.
episode, which was like letting your passion enrich the classroom, like leading by
Yeah.
your passion instead of just, oh, I have to teach this, even though
Yeah.
like I'm just going to do a checkbox method. And that
Mhm.
doesn't seem to really motivate the students.
I don't think about did my chairship allow me to think about my pedagogy. I mean, talking to and observing and going to observe, writing first year writing orientations, really hearing the wide range of things that my first year writing colleagues are doing, all with ultimately the same goal, which is that our students will have done a certain amount of writing, that they will have done a certain amount of critical thinking. There are so many ways to do that, and each one motivated by what was authentic to that person led to really good teaching, or it seemed to, as far as I could tell. Every class I observed has been really interesting and very different. So I
Yeah.
think that really, as long as we know what the goals are, we can figure out how to meet them in a way that's authentic to us as a teacher.
Yeah. Well, and I know Amina as an undergrad,
Mm.
student, she had a question for you, Angela.
Oh,
So
excellent.
I'm excited to
That's going to be the hardest
hear it.
question to answer, I bet.
Now that the fall season is here, you may be wondering, okay, I had all of these beach reads, Andrew, but now I don't know what books to read for the fall. Well, guess what? My friends at the Gay and Lesbian Review magazine have you covered. Their new September and October issue, called Forgotten Histories, features wonderful book recommendations, TV shows, and films that help excavate LGBTQ history. So, whether you're interested in learning more about the connection between shopping and the gay community, which, I have a Home Goods and Marshalls addiction, as my fiance knows. They got you covered there. They have an article about the attraction of Confederate gentlemen by the incredible writer Andrew Holleran. There's an article about the French evolution of sexual identities and even the first LGBT riot, which happened in 1953. Go over to glreview.org. You can get either a digital subscription or a print subscription. I love my print subscription, which I'm holding up right here. And with the exclusive code ITBR Choice, you will get a free issue with your subscription. So ITBR Choice, put that in the promo code section and get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review print or digital subscription. I know you're going to love their magazine.
As I was forming my question, you were answering it, which led to a different question. So then I guess that means you're doing an excellent job. I guess I was wondering, you were saying about, we can learn the same amount from those three poems as we can from the novel. Because my initial question was, I wish more professors would push us to read the novel, like
Mhm.
push the boundary. Why should we get off easy by, reading a little bit? Like
Mhm.
I wish that more professors would set the expectation from the first day of class, we're going to read.
Mhm.
Because when I was like in high school, my parents were always telling me, when you get to high school, it's a book, when you get to college, it's a book a week, and or something like that. And then when I got to college, it wasn't a book a week.
Yeah.
First, my question was, why aren't students pushing about, why aren't we being pushed, with novels? But then I guess my question formed to why aren't we being pushed just to read more weighty texts,
Mhm.
like text that will, if even if the page count doesn't have to be 1,000 pages, it just feels like we're being delivered these shallow, lukewarm texts all of a sudden because professors are maybe afraid that we as students are, automatically going to turn to AI or automatically going to turn to
Mhm.
ChatGPT, so they don't give us the chance
Mhm.
to, read more difficult text.
Mhm.
Even like as an example, last semester we read The Wasteland, T.S.
Yeah.
Eliot, and
Love that poem.
my professor loved it. I loved it, but my professor was really adamant about if there's a reference, because it's very reference heavy. If there's
Yeah.
a reference that's being made to something you don't understand, just like she wasn't saying look it up or anything like that. She was like, I'll explain it when you get to class. I'll give you the answer, or you can ask ChatGPT and it'll sum up the reference in relation to the text instead of making us question or making us guess or telling us just find the reference and look it up and try to make the connection on your own. And so I feel like, do you feel like not having the expectation set from the beginning that we're going to read, or that it's very, reading intensive, does that kind of shift how, how we're learning?
I think it can. Again, because I mostly teach upper level English, I go in with the expectation that my students are going to do the reading and that they want to read hard things, and sometimes I get pushback. The one, comment I often get in evaluations is there was too much reading. But I also, don't ever shy away from teaching things that are very hard. And as a medievalist, what hard means is complicated because often something will seem simple on the surface, but then, nobody understands how things operated in 1400. So we have to kind of go back to that. But also some of the things that I've been teaching recently, I've been committed to teaching a much more global sense of the Middle Ages. So we're reading things from, Ethiopia or Japan or China. And some of them, again, we have to always step back and sort of think about what about the context do we not understand? And some of those things I hope students will look up, and some of them might not be easy for them to do that. So I do want to set fairly high expectations from the start. I mean, again, if you don't set them, no one will meet them. And if so I don't see the point, right? If you set high expectations and students don't meet them across the board, with the entire class, maybe you needed to rethink some of what you were doing. But if some students don't meet them, they're all have not met. There are lots of expectations I've set for myself that I haven't met. And I think that's what I meant by sort of becoming a little bit more easy about that instead of being punitive about it, to try to be a little more understanding about, so what was hard? And I've been doing, I learned this from a colleague, sort of more check-ins. Like I do a midterm check-in, like what would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of? What do you think's going well? What do you think's not going so well? So I have a little bit more sense of how my students are responding to what we're doing in class. But it interests me always. One of the last day, I always do an attendance question. Then one of the last days, I always ask, what was the favorite thing that you read? And it's not always in fact, not often the easier things. It's often the harder ones. It's often the more challenging ones that students have enjoyed the challenge, have enjoyed thinking through difficult issues. So, I mean, I would say about half my class picked Dante last
Wow.
semester from the medieval class. And Dante is hard. I mean, I don't feel like I teach Dante particularly well. You know, I feel like it's filled with references. It's like the Wasteland, except, you know, they're all medieval and weird. And yet they really enjoyed things about it, and they really enjoyed the ideas. And uh, I had such a funny conversation with somebody, you know, it was sort of about the ways that the academy is being attacked by the current political regime. And I
Mm.
was teaching a text called Ide et Olive, which is a medieval French romance in which the main character runs away dressed as a man because her father wants to marry her, because after her mother dies, he says there's no woman who comes up to her mother other than her, so he wants to marry her. She doesn't want to marry her father. That's sinful. Nobody can talk him out of it, so she runs away dressed as a man. She becomes increasingly successful at being a man as the story continues. She becomes a great fighter. She gets in with a band of robbers. She starts cursing. And she shows up
Very
in the court of
Disney's
the,
Mulan,
I know,
Angela.
very, very much, except she ends up in the court of the Roman emperor, where it's interesting because she shows up and he notices how big and brawny she is, which is fascinating because at the beginning she's described as like typical medieval princess. She's very successful. She saves his life. His daughter falls in love with her, and he arranges the marriage between them. And so there are two women married to each other, and she finally confesses. And the daughter is like, okay, you know, as long as you hold and kiss me at night, that's fine. It's not a problem. Um, and but then they're overheard and exposed, and they're going to be killed. And then this angel comes down and says to the king, you know, don't make Ede take a bath. Ede has everything that a man needs,
Hmm.
you know, that a man needs to succeed. And we are led to assume that Ede has now been turned into a man because then they have a baby named Croissant, which is like, how do you not like croissant, right? So this is a complicated text. You know, it's really raises a lot of very contemporary issues. And somebody said to me, "Are you scared teaching this?" And I was like, "No, I'm scared teaching Dante because I teach it so damn badly, but I teach this text really well. Why would I be scared, right? You know, if people need to know that this is a long history, right? So that's you know, and many of my students whose favorite text wasn't Dante said that it was this,
Hmm.
because we had such interesting conversations around it. Like, what does the text think that is happening here? You know, and what does it imagine Ede is, and how does it reconcile, or how does it deal with the fact that it doesn't know? It often has trouble with Ede's pronouns. Uses he, it uses she, it uses he, it uses she, uses the masculine form of the name, uses the feminine form of the name in French. So, you know, we had a lot of fun talking about this rather challenging text about which very little has been written. Um, and so I think, you know, you really can approach interesting things and hard things with students.
Well,
Uh,
like even Angela, I just remember kind of what Amina's brought up is
yeah.
when I was Jan's student, and we're talking about like 2012.
Mhm.
But even I
So
just
young.
remember from 2012 to like my PhD
Hmm.
that there were so many controversial texts or
Yeah.
sexuality, gender
Hmm.
conversations, race studies.
Hmm.
And it wasn't under this microscopic light of we're going to try to censor this conversation. And I'm just like wondering,
Mm.
I'm not asking you to like solve the political crisis right now, because
I
I
wish I
know,
could, you
I
know.
know, I wish we all
I'm
could,
looking, I keep
but
looking for somebody to run for co-president with me. You know, somebody
yes,
who knows something about foreign affairs and, you know, housing
but
and
like,
urban development and all the stuff I know nothing about, you know.
but
Let's
like,
run for co-president.
do you actually feel that the students in your classroom are trying to poke holes in what you're teaching, like trying to, find what they can criticize you about because of this political regime? Or do you really think no, the students actually, like Amina said, are thirsty for this knowledge and this has just kind of become a straw man argument?
It's a straw man argument, at least for upper level English majors. I mean, I have not taught either the university core or English 1201 and 1202 in a long time, so there might be students. But I will say this medieval lit class had mostly non-English majors. It was a very strange makeup for a class because it counts for the university core, for the advanced course. And the students from all different disciplines seemed quite excited to talk about these variety of things. And I never felt that a student was, kind of being critical or didn't want to engage with the subjects. I mean, I had one student whose political opinions I was uncertain of. I knew he was very religious. Um, but then when I asked what their favorite works were, his were Edith Olive and Mulan. So, okay. So I think, again, to leave lots of space for students to have differing opinions and not to be saying you have to think one way about this and to say, this is what they wrote in the 12th century. This is what, they thought. Now, what do we want to think about it? What do we want to do about it? I think there's a certain luxury in teaching medieval too. It's so old, it's so weird, it's so foreign, nobody knows anything about it, that there's a little bit more space. But also inevitably in a course where you're teaching something like Ida to Leave, you're also teaching some fairly, if you're being responsible to trying to show the wide range of genres that people wrote in, some quite religious material, even if that in itself is also very radical. So one
Mm.
question that comes up when I teach British surveys, I teach a little, and back to excerpts, right? An excerpt of the book of Marjorie Kemp, who was a woman who, 14th century woman who, um, because she sort of had a vision from God that she needed to atone for a sin she had committed. She never says what it is. She stopped sleeping with her husband, with whom she's had 14 children at this point. She wears all white. She goes on religious pilgrimage. She's a lunatic. She weeps, she cries, she does all these crazy things. And Julian of Norwich, who's much more traditional, she is a nun, she's an anchoress, she lives in a little room off the side of the altar and lives on communion wafers for a million years, but writes about her ideas. Let's think about which one of these is more radical. And in many ways, people say, well, Marjorie, she gives up this life, she makes these choices. But then Julian's theology keeps talking about Jesus as mother. Like,
Mm.
okay, so now we have a female member of the Trinity. She doesn't say Mary, mother of Jesus, says Jesus, our mother, so who nurses us at her breast, and uses feminine pronouns for Jesus. So that's pretty radical. So even within the context of a very Catholic text written by a nun and anchoress, we can have these really fascinatingly complicated ideas. And
Well,
so I think students like that, actually. I think they get excited about the ways that a lot of their stereotypes about what they think of as a boring period um, are really not. And even in the most sort of religious material, that it's not just expressing doctrine, but really kind of challenging a lot of ideas.
I think this is fascinating because you're having me, Angela, like not even just rethink, but like bring to the forefront that a text like Beloved by Toni Morrison
Oh,
has been so put under scrutiny. I
hmm
think a lot of that is because it's a woman of color. I think
sure.
that, queer authors, writers of color have really been like,
Mhm.
under the ringer right now. But yet,
Absolutely.
the Iliad, the Odyssey, there's
Mhm.
so much eroticism. Like this is
Oh,
these are the
yeah.
Greek gods and goddesses. And
Yeah.
like so that's why is it really about the text and the literature or is it really just about trying to pinpoint like authors that you like kind of just saying that um we have a certain authority to get rid of certain writers. And
I think the whole thing is trying to distract people from the real issues, you know. Uh,
yes, what are the
the
real
real issues,
issues?
like we have a lot of issues to solve in this country that have nothing to do with who's reading what in elementary school. Um, and so I think that's really at the heart of a lot of it. And of course, it's the whole thing is idiotic. Nothing you read turns you into anything other than a better critical thinker, and a better critic. And I mean, I will give a really weird example of
Yeah.
this, which I was in Paris with my sister and my niece, and this was supposed to be my 60th birthday present because I took my sister to Iceland and my niece to London when she was 16. She's now 30. But they're very bonded, and I felt during a lot of the trip that in some ways I was sort of a third wheel to the two of them. They're so close. And then I was reading a middle grade novel set in Paris because I said, in Paris, I'm going to read a book set in Paris. And I found this middle grade novel. And there was a huge scene of reconciliation between two sisters. And I suddenly had this like, what am I doing? My sister took me to Paris. They made all the arrangements for all of the things. I didn't have to do a damn thing other than show up. Why am I being such a pill? And it totally changed my mindset about the trip, being with them. I enjoyed everything from that point on 10 times more. Uh, so I had a total mind reset because of something I read in a book. So yes, it can change you and make you more critical thinker, but I can read Toni Morrison and it's not going to turn me into an African American enslaved person, right? It's just going to teach me about that experience through the lens of somebody else. And so, I think it's the whole thing with banning books is idiotic. It's unfortunate and dangerous and terrible. And so wrong and so bad and so unfair to the kids who don't get to read this wide range of books about things that they might be interested to know about. Um, and, such spurious arguments always. Um, but fortunately, I think in college, we don't have to abide by those. Nobody's banning the books that we're teaching. So this is a great opportunity to bring things to the table that some of our students might not have had the opportunity to experience because of this. So we have the opportunity to maybe rectify some of what's going on and to say, you know, read this book. You don't have to like it. I didn't write it, right? You don't have to like Toni Morrison. Just read it and see what you get out of it. And maybe you don't like it, but maybe you'll think about why you didn't like it. And why was that? And what are the reactions you're having? And why might you be having those? And let's think about this. It's not wrong. Your reactions are not wrong. They're your reactions, but why are you having them? And what's the context for that? So again, I think that's one of the privileges of getting to teach college is that we do have a lot more freedom, a
Mm.
lot less supervision. Uh, and then we can
Mhm.
bring things to our students that they might be craving or that they might didn't not have even known were out there and get excited about, or they could hate them, which is fine.
Which is
know,
their
as,
opinion.
as I
And
keep saying, I
prerogative.
didn't write it. You don't have to like Beowulf. I didn't write it, you know. But let's think about it. Let's talk about it. And even something like Beowulf, you can talk about such interesting things. I mean, I think about the Grendel's mother section and the fact that they talk about the way that the peasants see Grendel and his mother walking at night. Um, and maybe there's something going on about indigenousness or class here. Could these have been the original inhabitants of this land that was then taken over by Hrothgar and the Danes? And what happens if we think about them that way? Or, so many different kinds of interesting lenses that you can apply that I think our students can get excited about.
Well, and that example with Paris, I thought was
Mm,
so interesting, Angela, because like you're really bringing to bear even why when I go in a library or a bookstore, there's such a like I always say to my students, you might not feel the magic I do, but if
mhm.
you can just go into a bookstore or I mean, I proclaim for them all to get a library card because like that's
Yeah.
my mission is just see what it's like walking around and seeing what calls to you. Like
Hmm.
you have such an intimate interaction with a novel. And
Yeah.
like for you, it taught you a lesson about your sister. Like this
Yeah.
is about us finding empathy, about finding lives that we're not going to live. And it's
Yeah.
such a teaching moment that literature is powerful because knowledge is power. And it's really
Yeah.
true. Like if
Yeah.
you keep trying to attack
Yeah.
literature, you're
Mm.
attacking us having free thinking in
Yeah.
a society.
Yeah. Well, and
Yep.
the goal is to make us stupid. And right, we don't want to be stupid.
No, I don't think
I mean,
I don't think we should be
I keep
mindless
saying to,
people.
like, I keep saying to my class, don't use AI. Yes, it's artificial, but no, it's not intelligent. It's stupider than you. It's way stupider than you. It can think one way, and that's by sticking words together that it's already seen stuck together, right? It cannot have the kinds of thinking that you can have. And
And why do you think they're using it, Angela? Like that's my question. Do you think that they're doing it in high school and it's just like a comfort for them? Now that the college semester has begun, You know that there are so many books that I can't wait to recommend to you all. Well, my favorite independent publisher, Broadview Press, has some incredible books that have just come out. One of them I'm actually using in my writing course. It's called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college by Rachel Tukolsky. It is such an accessible and interesting book that includes writing exercises for your students. I highly recommend it. Another book that you should get your hands on, especially if you are a writing or English professor, is Academic Writing Now by David Starkey. It includes wonderful, popular essays, nonfiction essays that you can use in your classroom, and they cover a wide range of genres. I cannot wait to use them in my courses. And another book just in time for the Halloween season is Vampire Literature and Anthology, co-edited by Robin Warner and Elizabeth Lewis. I had both of them on the podcast, so listen to that episode because you're going to love all of the vampire literature we talk about. Use my exclusive promo code, go to broadviewpress.com and use the code Ivory Tower for 20% off your order. Yes, 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
I think there's some of that. I think it's goes back to that sort of short attention span, that the work it takes to sit down and write a paper, may be very challenging to their attention spans, and they don't think they're interested, and they don't think they care, and maybe they don't know better, and then they fall into the habit of just doing ChatGPT, and then they never find out until you or I or Jan slap them upside the head for it and say, zero, this paper was written by ChatGPT, not by you. Some of them I think are anxious. I think some students are afraid of not doing, so how many times have you been asked by a student, like, I just don't know what it is you want, or what is it that you want me to do in this assignment? And it's like, I want you to think about this question and then answer it, it as you understand it. But I think that fear of not doing what we want is very strong. I think a lot of students think they don't write well, and that ChatGPT will write better, or that Grammarly will write their paper better, which has been an interesting change in my teaching. I mean, and now look at a paper that has no mistakes, and I'm very suspicious where, it's like, oh, good, look, a paper that's full of mistakes. I know the student wrote it. That's great. It's such a different way of thinking. For me, girl grammarian who teaches historical linguistics, to suddenly be like, oh, I don't, great, lots of subject verb agreement. It must actually be by my student. But again, I think it's again, I don't want to say it's laziness, because I think that's shortchanging the sort of anxiety that's at the heart of it. I think there are some people who are lazy. They're, you've taught them, I've taught them. Amina's been in class with them. The people who just, aren't going to do it, and they just don't care, and whatever it is. And their habits of mind or habits of practice are such that they are lazy. But there are many more people for whom that anxiety about not doing well is more of a driving factor. I think that they think something else can do it better than they can. And I think trying to be as encouraging as possible by doing as much of the work in class and as much of the kind of thinking work in class, and to be encouraging of students' great ideas may be the one way around it. I don't know. I'm not I'm not feeling like I have all the answers where AI is concerned, or even any of them.
Mm. Do you feel like you're,
Mm.
do you feel like the ways that your students has drastically changed with how they're learning, Angela? Or do you feel like it's kind of just shifted a modality, if that makes sense? Like, has it just, now the question is the attention span, like the brain plasticity of students because of
I think we
technology?
I think there's a different kind of plasticity too. I think when I was coming up through the ranks, as it were, 100 years ago in the last century, I had to memorize stuff. I mean, I had to remember things. I had to learn stuff. Uh, Now it's so easy to look it up that people don't have that habit and that practice. Um, I tell people I know people who can recite the entire first 5 books of the Bible. If you give them a part of the beginning of a verse, they can recite the rest of it, and they can't conceive of a practice by which you would learn that. Um, we had to memorize poems. We had to, memorize dates in history classes. So memorize people's phone numbers, all sorts of, there were practical uses for the kind of memorization that we would do in class as well. And now information is just so easily available. And I think that has made a significant change in students' learning habits as well. So it's very hard. They don't retain information very well.
Mm.
Um, again, trying to get people to remember the names of characters in something we just read or whatever it might be can be very challenging. And when I say, write it down, and I show the back of my book where I've made a list of all the characters and who's related to whom, and, my own little Beowulf chart of who's related and which Harogar is related to which Hrothgar and all of that. They're sort of like, like it would never occur to them to do something like that. And when I try to get them to practice it in class, even they sort of don't quite know what they're doing. And I mentioned, I know I sent you the answers to the questions. You said, are there any sort of resources that you like to use?
Mm.
There's a very light academia British, very white young woman called Ruby Granger, who's a YouTuber. And a lot of her videos are like, I go to Scotland and read books, but she has some excellent study tip videos, including things like talk to your friends about the things that you're reading, and write certain things down in certain ways. And I like to show those or have my students look at them and then ask them as a question, like, which of these do you think you might do? And how would you do it? To try to, not to say, well, what's wrong with you because you don't have these habits, but try to see if there are ways I can teach them or encourage them. Because I do think that it is very different. And I think it makes it harder to appreciate what you've read when you can't remember any of it.
That
So
is
learning mnemonics or whatever they might be.
that is so helpful, Angela. And
Yeah.
it like reminds me of, I just remember in senior year of high school where I was in AP English and it was so exciting, even though a lot of students groaned, but
Yeah.
I was a student who was always excited for
This is
literature,
why you
which,
have a PhD in English.
yes. But I remember when my teacher started to recite the Middle English of the Canterbury
On that
Tales. I was
April
like,
with her shoulders
Juan April.
I can do it.
And it was just such, we had to memorize it and then perform it in front of the class. And that was part of our grade. And I remember, I think we had to memorize a Keats poem. It was
Mhm.
a lot. And I think I've started going back to those lessons, not to make the students nervous, but do more of those recitations. Or even, I think, Angela, you taught me.
Yeah.
I gave my students and gifted them at the beginning of the semester. I give them a small journal and
Mhm.
I have them answer a question at the beginning of class and write it down. And I've started to realize putting pen to paper is actually a skill that they're not doing.
Yeah.
And it's something like I took for granted
Me
because it
too.
was something that I grew up doing. And it's like, oh, maybe we now have to do the pre-technology teaching and kind of like meet in the middle. And that it's something I'm still trying to work through. And I'm curious, like, if you feel like, where have you found maybe technology has helped you? Like, is there something
Mhm.
that you now use with technology that you're glad that it exists in your teaching?
I mean, I am a big fan of the film clip, the YouTube video, all of those things. I found so many resources that are helpful. Like I teach history of the English language. This is my historical linguistics. And there's so many great videos out there, explaining Verner's Law or showing them different accents, and talking about the different accents that people speak English with, whether in the US or England or across the world. There are wonderful, historical, like the story of the Anglo-Saxons coming from, Germany and Denmark and coming to England, and how Old English emerged from those languages. So those kinds of things, the availability of things I find really useful. And the availability of the learning management system to make an archive of those things I find really useful. But beyond that, I am not a great teacher with technology. It isn't really one of my skills. I have colleagues who do amazing things with technology. I think I can do amazing things with a pencil and paper and some magic markers. Like I know people who use annotation tools, and I have no idea how to use them. But if I say to my students, bring a couple of different colors of magic marker, we're going to annotate a paragraph, I can do that. Or even do it, with the stylus in my laptop and project it on the board, I can do that. So I find that I'm still sort of better with the old technologies in some ways. Although I do find that I could not imagine now teaching without the benefits of the learning management system and the ability to, with such ease, show such a wide variety of resources and make those available. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
so
I mean,
that's, I guess, what I would say. And that's not the most cutting edge of use of technology by any means, but that's what's been working for me.
yeah, well, and I feel like you've given us so many. Like, I just love the text you brought up and the way that you approach teaching it. And, Jan is there, or Amina, anything else, we need
Yeah.
Angela's here to pick her brain about, as she's a captive guest in the podcast space.
I mean, I hope you're
Happening
planning
is
to go on for
research.
possible more work in English because you seem amazing.
It's passion. It's why we're all here, right?
Yeah.
I my first like and backup question to back up a little bit, hope we don't run out of time, is why do you think that so many students are feeling alienated from the English major? We were just reading the New Yorker article, like Death of the English paper, and
Mhm.
it was discussing how more and more students they're not writing, and so just it feels like there's like this disconnect. But even in my own experience, in like that first year writing course, it's like a requirement. And I was wondering, like, is it the texts that are being taught? Like, you're someone who was the chair of the English department, so you're overseeing the texts that are being taught in those courses. So you feel like the texts that are being taught are the things that are maybe pushing students away from wanting to continue to, pursue the English major? Is it the papers? Like, why is it that when we are in these spaces, it feels like, everybody's just, they've got their laptop open, they're kind of listening to the text, but they're not really engaging. Is it an engagement issue, or is it a text issue, or is it just like the fact that, maybe the professors are not forcing us to take charge? I don't know. I'd like to Andrew's point earlier about like being a senior in high school. When I was in high school, every day we did a Socratic seminar, like, and a different student would facilitate the discussion. So we had to come prepared with the text annotated with the different colors and show that we had done it on paper and come up with our own questions. And even if they were crappy questions,
Mhm.
at least someone was still asking things and we were kind
Yeah.
of forced. So is it a text issue? Is it an engagement issue? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's sort of more front-ended than that. I think students are being pushed to decide what they want to study coming into college. I mean, we weren't even allowed to choose our major until the end of our first year, when I started. And I think they come in thinking that they're going to college for some practical reason, that they should major in something that has a job at the end of it, not realizing that English has lots of jobs at the end of it. And, whenever I go to an open house and I'm talking to students, and again, tends to be self-selected because it tends to be students who are planning to major in literature, creative writing. I say to them, every one of our graduates gets a good job. and here are the things that they do. Here are the things they go on to do. These are amazing things. The culture industry employs huge numbers of people, right? We've got this huge culture industry. English majors are very much valuable in that. We've got students working in taxation. We've got students running banks. We've got students who are IT managers, right? It doesn't have to be, they're not all being novelists. There's this idea that an English major isn't practical. So I think students who would otherwise really like to be English majors or really enjoy English think that they should major in something very concrete, not realizing that, in fact, people who major in those very concrete things often, kind of stagnate pretty quickly. And if you major in something very concrete and it turns out you hate it, what else do you have? But if you're an English major and you decide you want to go into something else, you didn't like being a lawyer, so maybe you would like to go into publishing. You have all the skills for that. So I think the English major has gotten a very bad rap. It's because it was sort of a joke, right? What are you going to do with that? Open an English store kind of thing. The same with philosophy and religion and history and all of the humanities. So I think that's really it. And one of the ways that we gain majors fairly often is students who, decide they're going to major in computer science or diplomacy or whatever. And then they take, core English 2 with Andrew or somebody equally wonderful, and they think, wait, I hate my computer science classes and I love this English class. I'm going to major in English. And I can't tell you how many times as department chair, I had to talk their parents off a ledge saying, your kid's going to get a job. They are not going to live in your basement for the rest of their lives and follow a Grateful Dead tribute band. They are going to have a fine, good, decently paying job that will make them happy and allow them to have a life. And they don't have to go to law school to do it. They can, but they don't have to. So,
Yeah.
It was really, I think there's this attitude that it's just not a good thing to major in, which, as an English major, that's totally not true. You're developing really important skills, every day. And, a person who majors in finance can't do anything other than finance. And they
Yeah.
kind of have to start all over again. Whereas an English major can go do finance, right? I know plenty of English majors who've gone off and gotten MBAs, and tend to do something a little fancier than being the bottom of the line in a finance department somewhere. So I think it's just gotten a really bad rap. So we have to, change that reputation. But when you've got, political regimes out there trying to discredit everything we do, it gets harder.
Yeah,
So,
there's so
I think,
many transferable skills, like you're saying,
yeah,
Angela. And it's like, even if they followed the Grateful Dead tribute band,
yeah,
hopefully they can become their social media coordinator or the
exactly.
marketing
Yeah,
expert,
yeah.
right? It's
yeah.
it's
And
amazing
I'm
to
just going to say,
see.
it's no accident that Joe Biden was an English minor. Anthony Fauci was an English major. Look, he was,
Yes.
they did not go on to be English anything. They went on to do wonderful things that, but tells you something, right?
Yeah, and I think the media space right now too,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's the podcast space or, they really want
Mm-hmm.
that critical reasoning. They want those who
Yeah,
can synthesize a lot of research and narrative, right? Narrative
yeah,
studies is what English is all about. And
yeah.
narrative there's a book that I just always recommend called Why Read Now by Elaine Castillo. And
I'm writing it down.
yes, it's incredible. And she talks about that reading is not the printed text only. Reading is your conversation on the phone. It's
Mhm.
engaging with TikTok. It's what happens, with someone you disagree with. And like, can we just shift the frame
Mhm.
about reading is all around us? And
Yeah, reading is
that's
fundamental.
reading is fundamental and it's part of every profession, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So is writing,
Yes,
so is thinking. And,
exactly.
that's 90% of
Exactly.
what you do as an English major.
Yes.
Uh,
So,
The other 10% is complaining about your professors. So,
yeah.
you
Well,
know.
hopefully, I don't think ever you, Angela.
Oh, of
So,
course they do. Of course they do. You know.
well, I mean, if your only complaint on your evaluation is that you assign too much reading, you're good. Uh,
Yeah. I always just think of the first day when we were teaching when we went out for COVID. And I turned on my screen and my students turned on their screen, and I was in a different apartment, but they looked behind me and were like, "Oh my God, no wonder you always say you're going to be just crushed to death by your books, Weisel." You know, 'cause I have so many books, and so that's what I think my students think of me, that I'm sort of a lunatic, but that's okay. It's always good to have them wondering what you might or might not do. Think you're a little crazy.
I I love that. Well, Angela, you've taught us so much here. I mean, you're
Thank
always
you.
teaching me, but I'm so glad that all the listeners and, they're taking your advice. If there's students listening right now, I'm sure they're really thinking, or people out there who might have ended their college career. You've
Mhm.
probably encouraged them to read some medieval texts, or at
I hope
least,
so.
get their hands on, whether it's books or just really shifting this dynamic of what it means to study literature, which I think studying literature doesn't just happen in college. It happens, you know,
Yeah,
anywhere in your current
yeah.
career journey. So, Angela, is there anything, you recommend for us, those listening,
Mhm.
where can they find you, whether it be, your website, social media, anything you want to share with us?
I'm very, very easy to find. I think I'm the only Angela Weisel. There is an Andrea Weisel. She's probably a long lost cousin. She's also a medievalist in England. But yeah, I'm very easy to find. I'm not much of a social media presence, but I have written some books about the Middle Ages and about medievalism, which is contemporary responses to the Middle Ages, which is something I really love and am fascinated by. Why do we keep telling medieval stories now? What about them is so compelling to us? What about this dark past is so interesting to us? Um, and so I hope people get medieval in some way or another, and really think about why we maybe love that period so much. Why is it such a standard function of culture right now?
Yeah,
And not
The
always.
Inferno has never been so resonant as it is in the last decade.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is very true. So, think
Yes.
medieval, but read books. The thing I would say to people is just go find something that interests you and read it. It's just such a good habit of mind. It's so good for you. It's good for keeping your brain young. It's better than doing crossword puzzles. Just do it. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
On
And
that,
don't tell your children not to be English majors.
yes, that
Yes.
too. Thank you,
Yes.
Angela.
Yes. Tell
This
them
is,
that they should be English majors.
yes, this has
Yeah.
been so wonderful. And I thank you for your
Thanks.
time
Thank you
coming
so
on the
much.
show
Thank
and
you. Thank you
continuing
for
to teach
being willing
us.
to have me.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, bye to you,
Wonderful.
Angela, and bye
It-
to all the listeners
yes.
out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.